afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well. It is Monday. Today is Monday. I'm retweeting this real quick. I wanted to reach out to retired Lieutenant Colonel Jim Hickman after he did this thread the other day, and I'm going to tag him in this in a few minutes. But I reached out and I just sent him a tweet asking for him to contact me and see if we could get him on the podcast, and he responded in DM. And he's really not interested in publicity or anything like that. So he agreed that I could ask him a couple questions, and he'd respond in writing to me, and then I'd have permission to then read that statement on the show. And there was just a little miscommunication. I got a little late, but I don't want to wait on this because I've observed over the past 24 to 48 hours the left-wing lynch mob come for him, and he is, he's in poor health, I guess you could say, and he doesn't, in my opinion, it's just, there needs to be some kind of a counter here. The guy is a hero, and served his country valiantly, and we'll get into that in a second. But first, I want to read this thread for everybody. Just popping this chat out real quick. He said this the other day. He said, I know Alex Vindman from a combined U.S.-Russian exercise called Atlas Vision 12 in Grafenwohr, Germany, I guess that is. He worked with the Russian embassy, and I was assigned to the Joint Multinational Training Command within the U.S. Army Europe. He worked coordination with the Russian 15th Peacekeeping Brigade, and I was in charge of all simulations planning, as well as assisting the USAREUR lead planner as the senior military planner. The following account of LTC Vindman's words and actions are completely accurate to the best of my recollection, have been corroborated by others. Now, Vindman is the gentleman who went in to testify the other day that he was, he wanted to change the transcript to accurately reflect what was said. And, he was being held up by everybody as you cannot criticize this man. He is untouchable. He's a decorated war hero. How dare you question him, etc., so on and so forth. Bongino had a bunch of clips on this. This is the guy that Jim Hickman's talking about, Colonel Hickman's talking about. This account is completely accurate to the best of my recollection and has been corroborated by others. We interacted on several different occasions throughout the planning cycle, but it was during the actual execution of the exercise that we had an issue relevant to his recent testimony. As stated earlier, Atlas Vision 12 was conducted at JMTC in the VBS2, which is the Virtual Battle Simulations 2 classrooms for simulation. Vindman, who was a major at the time, was sitting in on one of the classrooms talking to the U.S. and Russian soldiers, as well as the young officers and GS employees, about America, Russia, and Obama. He was apologetic of American culture, laughed about Americans not being educated or worldly, and really talked up Obama and globalism to the point of uncomfortable. He would speak with the Russian soldiers and laugh as if at the expense of the U.S. personnel. It was so uncomfortable and unprofessional. One of the GS employees came and told me everything above. I walked over and sat within earshot of Vindman, and sure enough, all was confirmed. One comment truly struck me as odd, and it was with respect to Americans falsely thinking they're exceptional. When he said he, meaning Obama, is working on that now. And he said it with a snide, I know a secret look on his face. I honestly don't know what it meant. It just sounded like an odd thing to say. Regardless, after hearing him bash America a few times in front of our subordinates, Russians, and GS employees, as well as hearing an earful about globalization, Obama's plan, etc., I'd had enough. I tapped him on the shoulder and asked him to step outside. At that point, I verbally reprimanded him for his actions, and I'll leave it at that so as not to be unprofessional myself. The bottom line is Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was a partisan Democrat at least as far back as 2012, so much so junior officers and soldiers felt uncomfortable around him. This is not your professional field grade officer who has the character and integrity to do the right thing. Don't let the uniform fool you. He is a political activist in uniform. I pray this nation will drop, our nation will drop this hate, vitriol, and division and unite as our founding fathers intended. He goes on to say, I need to make a slight correction on my statement. It was actually Atlas Vision 13 when the incident occurred. I was thrown off as the next year Russia invaded Crimea. Also, I was promoted to Chief Regional Joint and Combined Exercises Branch, USAREUR, over many exercises. So I had a few questions, wanted to speak with him, reached out again via Twitter. He responded to me and said, why don't you send me about 5 questions or so? And I'll do my best to answer them for you. So I did. I asked him a bunch of questions. I said, was this the only incident you'd experienced with Vindman? And did it, given his background, make you doubt his oath and his loyalties to the country? Did you see any signs that he'd been instructed to act in this way, or that he was at the direction of a superior other than you? Because at the time I had made a mistake with who was his superior. Did you think about him at all between then and when he made the news this time? And would he have needed permission to wear his uniform to this hearing? If so, who would have given it to him? What are your overall thoughts about the players involved with this impeachment and their connections, if you're aware of any connections? And what is the normal procedure if you disagree with policy or an order in the U.S. military? And I received my response, and I'm just going to read it to you now, and I'm going to hopefully pull up your questions so that I can see them when I'm done, or your comments. Hold on one second. Let me just get this ready. It's a little hard to maneuver this stuff here. One second. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. All right. He says this. Here's a bio for you guys real quick so that you understand his credentials and his legitimacy. He was prior enlisted in military intelligence, commissioned in 1996 as a field artillery officer, served as a Paladin platoon leader and battery commander, a company, battalion, and brigade fire support officer, commander and senior instructor of the Field Artillery Captain's Career Course and Targeting Warrant Officers Advanced and Basic Courses, Battalion's Operations Officer, Deputy Director of Training Support Activity Europe, Deputy Director of Simulations, JMSC, and the Chief Regional Joint and Combined Exercises Branch, USAREUR. Selected for higher command but had to decline due to medical retirement. Medevac to Walter Reed, now 100% disabled, wounded warrior fighting back. His awards consist of the Afghanistan Campaign Medal with 2 stars, Iraq Campaign Medal with 3 stars, Presidential Unit Citation, Combat Action Badge, Air Assault Badge, a Purple Heart, 2 Bronze Stars, Legion of Merit, 4 Meritorious Service Medals, 5 Army Commendation Medals, 2 Army Achievement Medals, a Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Global War on Terror Expeditionary Medal, Global War on Terror Service Medal, Korea Defense Service Medal, and NATO Medal. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He also shared with me that he has 2 pain electronic, basically they're electric discs that get implanted in your lower back, and they're pain blockers. They have to be charged every other day. And he also suffers from horrible migraines a couple times a week due to his condition. And he's basically bedridden at this point because of his wounds sustained in combat. So he's doing this, as he says, not because he wants this to be sort of a partisan exercise, but more because he really wants just to get the truth of this out there. And he feels like this is an important character thing that people need to know as this gentleman or Vindman does what he's doing right now. And there have been plenty of debates online and elsewhere about what this action that he's taking actually constitutes in terms of his oath, his service in the military, etc. But here we go. He says this. This is his words. This is retired Lieutenant Colonel Jim Hickman's words straight out. He says, I'm making a statement which encompasses the questions I was asked and some additional clarifying information based on harassing questions I've received from the left and even some on the right. I'm doing this in writing rather than in person because I'm not seeking recognition or, quote, praise from Trump supporters, as some have put it, but instead just to get the facts and truth out there that are relevant to the current situation. I do not wish to further denigrate Lieutenant Colonel Vindman other than to show the bias that could have had a bearing on his decision to come forward and on his testimony itself. The reason I came forward had a great deal to do with him, number one, disobeying a direct order by the commander-in-chief, his boss, by going before the impeachment hearing. Number two, his reasoning for coming forward had much more to do with his philosophy on our foreign policies, which are at the president's prerogative. And number three, he wore his ASU's Army service uniform to testify against the President of the United States of America, the man in command of our military forces, which may be the biggest political statement he could possibly make. Then, right on cue, the mainstream media began calling him a war hero with a Purple Heart and completely beyond reproach. Knowing his political bias, backed by his somewhat radical left-leaning ideology, it was my obligation, and indeed my duty, to come forward with this information. I couldn't go to the same mainstream media to put it out, nor could I go to the Army as they're backing Vindman, so I took to Twitter, a source for getting the truth out there. And now he's replying to me. He says, "You asked if this was my only encounter with Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, and other than the planning cycle for this exercise," the one he references in his thread, "I had no other contact with him. We were not close or even friends, merely acquaintances forced together by a combined U.S.-Russia exercise. I met him several times throughout the cycle, just not long enough to really garner an opinion. Your question on whether this incident, coupled with his background, made me doubt his oath and loyalty to the country is a good question. I didn't necessarily think he was working with the Russians in a nefarious way, but I did question his patriotism to our nation and the lack of respect given to Americans in general. I was indeed furious, and that's most likely why my boss, Tom Lash, remembers it so clearly." Step aside for a second, outside of this transcript that I'm reading. His boss had commented on his behalf on his Twitter. Back to the transcript now. "I won't go into what I said when I told Tom about it, as that would be unprofessional. I reported him more out of, quote, we may need some top cover for me chewing out a defense attaché officer than anything else." Hold on here. To your question regarding signs he had been directed to act in this way or that he was at the direction of a superior officer other than me, I would have to say no, I didn't see anything of this nature. As to the second part of your question, remember, he didn't work for me. He worked for the defense attaché at the Russian embassy. I corrected him solely as a superior officer witnessing a junior officer doing something wrong. We as officers are not supposed to talk about our political leanings, especially in front of subordinates, and never are we to talk down about Americans and our culture. You were asked if I thought about him in the period between the incident and seeing him come forward, and honestly, I haven't thought about him at all. However, when I saw him and understood what he was trying to accomplish, I knew immediately he was involved in this mess as a partisan Democrat. You asked about wearing his uniform and who would have given him permission to do that, and to be completely honest, that's above my pay grade. I'm not sure if he did or not, but he could have asked the Army Protocol Office before showing up in uniform. I believe the vast majority of Americans perceived this the same way I did, that it was a political statement. With respect to your question on what is the normal procedure if you disagree with foreign policy or a direct order, well, as a staff officer, which he essentially is, your job is to plan, coordinate, and execute based on the commander's foreign policy and or his orders, and to advise the commander. Remember, the president sets foreign policy, not Congress, and certainly not a lieutenant colonel staff officer. On foreign policy, he can advise until the president makes a decision, and then Lieutenant Colonel Vindman should salute and follow orders. This is why our military has worked so well for so many years. Before we move on to the last question, it's important to say everything above is based on fact and is the truth. Your last question below is more opinion-based and gets into some of my personal conservative views, so it needs to be discussed separately. I hope I've clarified everything for everyone on this. Your last question is indeed an interesting one when you ask, what are my overall thoughts about the players involved in the impeachment and their connections, if I'm aware of any such connections? Well, for starters, I think Adam Schiff's leading this impeachment inquisition is unconstitutional, and he should recuse himself as a fact witness. He and his staff are up to their necks involved in setting the president up for this impeachment, then his attempts to shape the narrative with his opening remarks at the first hearing with the new DNI prove his complicity. He's also lied to the American people and caused near irreparable damage to the fabric of our society during the Mueller investigation. He lied about speaking to the whistleblower. Then, as previously stated, he lied in front of Congress and the world by reading a fake transcript to sell a false narrative. So I think President Trump is exactly right to call this illegal and unconstitutional, and that's before you look into how they're running the hearings. I do not have any other facts bearing on the impeachment, and I don't like to speculate, so I'll leave it at that. In closing, again, I did not do this for recognition of any type, which is why this is being read to you. Please help me get this out to the public at large, as the truth is paramount, especially in these hyper-partisan times of division. Let's do what we can to repair all the damage done to our great nation by the propaganda from mainstream media. We must fight to get the truth out, to battle these lies, omissions of truth, and fabrications of false narratives about our president and Lieutenant General Flynn. I want to personally thank Tracy Beans for giving me the opportunity to get the truth out. Tracy is a tenacious truth seeker and a reporter who's making a difference in these turbulent times. Again, thank you, Tracy, for all you do. Many thanks to your listeners for their patience sitting through this. Hopefully they gained something from it. God bless you all, and God bless America. Okay, well, thank you very much for saying that. That's an honor, and I appreciate the compliments. If you want to reach him on Twitter to support him in this attack that's ongoing that I'm witnessing right now, you can find him at Jim_Hickman13, at Jim_Hickman13. And he really stressed wanting to get this message out to as many people as possible, because he's really, I'm seeing, again, this is my personal observation, what I'm seeing happen to this guy is such the hypocritical mess. We had all these people come out and state that you cannot attack Lieutenant Colonel Vindman because of his valiant military service. Meanwhile, they are attacking this gentleman for speaking the truth in a way that you'd expect, but is ridiculously antithetical to and hypocritical given their narrative that they're trying to put out there. So I just want to say that I, again, read this word for word, and I just wanted to get this out there so that you guys could hear it from him. I have a feeling that given that he wanted to do it this way, there won't be any mainstream, media or legacy media interviews done. I asked 5 questions that I could think of right off the top of my head for him, because I had an interest in finding out what else he thought, or what else he knew, or how far back this may have gone. And that's it. Very, very short message, very, very short video today, but maybe you want to stop on by his Twitter at Jim_Hickman13. Just if you agree with his words and if you support his statement, just give him a vote of confidence and thank him for his service to our great nation. Have a fantastic day, guys. Just wanted to get this out there for you, and I will talk to you very soon. Again, make sure you share this. As per Jim, he wants this out to as many people as possible. I don't usually ask for retweets, but shares on YouTube, but I will ask for them today. God bless everybody. I will talk to you soon.